What's up, Internet? Jeff Gretler here, head brand ambassador of Spiceworks. 20 years ago, a group of tech rebels decided IT didn't have to be boring. Leading that charge was a man who cut his teeth under Steve Jobs, learning from the best in the business. In 2006, he co-founded a movement to make IT simpler and way more spicy. Spiceworks. 20 years later, we're still here. To start this multi-part anniversary deep dive, we sat down with one of the men who started it all. Here's the original Chief Spice himself, Scott Abel. There he is.
How are you, sir?
Chief Spice. How are you, man?
Good.
It's always great to see you. We'll start. I thought we already have a nice intro for you that it's already baked, done, ready to go. But it kind of just still might want to get a little bit of like your origin story of like from your perspective.
Yes. How far back are we supposed to go? I'm like, I don't know.
I know. Well, we talked about like I went back to like 88 when you were under the tutelage of like Steve Jobs. I went there. I didn't go anything before that.
My God, ancient history. I don't know. I got to Austin in 1978. My mom moved here after my dad died, so I kind of moved here to help her out with my younger brothers. They were 11 at the time, and that's how I transferred to UT and graduated in December of 1980. I always tell people it was a different century. That's how you know if you're old. With a degree in physics, and I spent about, if I'm going up before Steve Jobs started to abuse me, spent about 7 years in software development. I was like maybe a B plus software developer. Loved solving the problems, didn't love making the code bulletproof and error proof and all of that. So I think in 85, I'm trying to remember, I took a job. This was kind of pivotal as a pre-sales tech support guy. So you'd go out with the sales guy and, explain the technology. And I was doing that for Apollo Computer. They were a big workstation company that lost to Sun. So that's probably why you've never heard of them. They got bought by HP. Anyway, I was there for about 3 years. And one of those guys that worked there, he went to this crazy company called Next. He was their first field, SE. And it was his job to kind of build the organization and hire the people. And so he called me up and he's like, "Oh, you got to come to work for this cool company." But at the time, this was before they'd announced the product. You knew absolutely nothing about, like, you didn't know they're building a computer. You didn't know what they were using. There were like 4 things known about it. And it was like, if you're an engineer, like none of them would help you. It was like, oh, well, Ross Perot invested. And I think they did say they were using Unix and display PostScript, and that's it. You didn't know, was it hardware or software? And when you took the job, you still didn't know. Like, you go out there for a day of interviews, they don't show you the product. It's all a leap of faith, as Steve liked to say. And so, idiocy consumed me, and I said yes. And I spent, 7 years there or something like that, till I left to start my first company.
Got it. And that was kind of that was your first foray into the technology world, right? That was, sorry.
Motive was the first company I started. Yeah. I'd worked in technology the whole time, but and we started Motive. I think the founding date was, like May 1st, 1997.
Wow. Okay. That was almost a full decade before the origin story that we all know for Spiceworks. So you had a lot of reps, you say, going into getting to that moment in 2006, eh?
Yes, yeah. I should have been beefier. I should have, like, those reps should have bulked me up a little bit more. Yeah, there were actually 2 companies before Spiceworks. We started Motive in May of 97, and then in I think it was February of 99, I was on a ski trip and I was trying to figure out how we could deploy Motive faster, because there was a lot of deployment friction. And I came up with this idea of, now we would call it a cloud application. Back then they were called called ASPs, application service providers, that we would host Motive. And then one thing led to another, and I'm like, oh, well, what people really want, they don't want Motive software, they want tech support by the drink. And so what if we took Motive software, we added a network of independent support technicians, and we took that combined service to the market for money. And that was a company called all.com. It got spun out of Motive in, I guess it was November of 99.
Okay.
And in March of 2000, we raised $60 million at a $300 million valuation. We only had 13 employees at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of a crazy time. Anyway, and then to that point of it being crazy, a year later, we shut it down, and we gave about, I don't know, it's about $50 million back to the investors. We'd only spend 7 or 8 million, something like that. Anyway, that was so traumatic. I said, oh, screw this startup thing. I'm never, ever doing this again. And, then I got leukemia after that. And that just convinced me that the startups were bad for you. And, but it's kind of like dating, like after you have a bad breakup, a little time goes by. You're like, well, that wasn't so bad. Women aren't so bad, And so in 2000 and early 2005, I started thinking about, I want to do another one. And, I approached Greg, and one thing led to another. In January 2006 is when we opened the doors for SpiceWorks.
That's all right. And 20 years later, when I saw the date, and I was just like, and we spoke a little bit last year, but then when I saw the date, it kind of just blows your mind that it's just like, that doesn't feel like 20 years ago, but I guess in a way it kind of does as well, that it's like still kicking.
Yeah, no, it doesn't feel like it at all. Like when you had said that, I was like, really? I want to go check my math. I'm like, that can't possibly be right. I don't look that old, do I? But it's been 20 years. That's amazing.
That's so thinking about that, what kind of popped in my head is I read some theories that the caterpillar needs the struggle to get out of the cocoon, because that's the only way you're going to be strong enough to sprout those wings. So I'd like to think that maybe the struggles that you went through sprouted these spicy orange wings in January of 2006. Was there like you said, when you spoke with, Greg, did something just happen? Did it feel like a bolt of lightning, or was it something that you spoke about before where there was a lot of pivoting that you're kind of like learning as you go? Like first we jump in the water, then we figure out the strokes.
Yeah. It was definitely the latter. I'd love to say that, I had some eureka moment and then everything just fell in place, but that'd be a total freaking lie. No, as a matter of fact, the first, we started, I think I approached Greg, maybe he was the first person I approached. The order of the founders were Greg, Jay, and then Francis came a little bit later. And Greg was probably July, early July of 2005. And we spent the first 3 months-ish of our meeting. We'd meet once, maybe twice a week for 2 or 3 hours. And it was all on culture stuff because Greg was with me at all.com. And we had a really bad cultural experience. A bunch of stuff went wrong, really bad. And, from investors to employees to, executives, it was just shitty. As a matter of fact, when I asked Greg, do you want to do another one? He said 2 things. I don't know I doubt he'll remember this. He goes, I'm in, but I have 2 requirements. He's like, first, use the F word a lot, so I won't use it here. But he goes, we can't hire any one of those effing outside CEOs. If you're not going to do it, I'm out. And he goes, and the second thing is we can't have some jacked up culture like all.com. Like, how are you going to keep that from happening? You're like, it was all my fault, right? Like I'm the only one responsible for making a good culture. But it was great because we had this kind of shared pain we were trying to avoid. And so, that's what the early work set off around that, a bunch of work trying to figure out what values did we care about, what behaviors did we not want, all that kind of stuff.
Well, if you allow me to grace you with some praise, I very particularly remember when I first started in 2011, and Greg did tell me about the no a-hole rule, right? A no a-hole rule that still to this day really changed. I personally think it changed the entire work culture of Austin, because you guys were very, very, sticklers for that rule. And we have so many great people come through the doors. And as people, their careers change and they leave and they go to these other companies, they took that with them. And now we're finding clusters of former Spice workers that are keeping that culture alive. So I should thank you guys for doing that, because you really did. I tell Jen that and she's like, no, no, no. And I was like, yes, 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 because I still keep in touch with a lot of these people versus LinkedIn. And they either talk about, oh man, it's not like Spiceworks, or we're trying to implement what Spiceworks did. So you guys really not only changed making IT spicy, but you really did change Austin work culture, in my opinion.
Look, it's very kind of you to say. I won't personally take credit for it. I think that the company as a whole, every employee got behind it, right? Like this vision of, I want to come into work, I want to be accountable, I want to be able to grow and do great things, and I don't want to have to put up with a bunch of bullshit in the process. That ideal, I think every employee was A, attracted to, but then B, they sustained that, they replicated that. I don't know if you remember this in our jumpstart that Jen designed. I have this one slide that looked like a brick wall, but it was made up out of photos. And I used to tell people, look, every one of you is a brick in the wall. Like, I can't do it. At maybe 5, 10, 20 people, I could do it alone. At 500 people, you can't do it alone. And so the strength of that culture came from every employee deciding, it is important enough to me that I'm going to be on the watch out for it. I'm going to police it. I'm going to watch out for it and make sure we behave the right way and do the right thing. So I think they all get the credit for it, right? We might have planted the seed, but the fact that it was something you all wanted and believed in, you kept it whole and kept it going.
And it's great that it did, because we still have, I still have text strings with people that I worked with before that aren't here anymore. Like on LinkedIn as well. We had an impromptu reunion at RSA last year where it's just like, it was Spiceworks, but there was like 6 or 7 other companies, but we all kind of came together, like getting the band back together. And it was great to have that moment. So I think you're right. A lot of people not only bought in, but they're like moving it forward in their career as well. So it was really fun to be a part of, and still is, obviously, because it leaked into the community, and the community is still one of the most positive communities in all of the internet, right? Like Reddit, you run into a lot of toxic spots, you run into like toxic fandoms here. Our community is still very, very positive, which is really hard to do. Yeah. And I think somehow it leaked over into the community as well.
Yeah, I think Jen, we're on this, I embarrass her. I think she gets a lot of credit for that. Collectively, the whole company did it. Don't get me wrong. Again, I think every single employee got the vision of what the IT pro represented to the company, how important they were, and so how we should treat them. But that I think in turn, almost like it reflected in a mirror, they saw that in themselves. And so how they treated themselves, they wanted a special place, right? They'd come from different communities or forums before where what you described was not true. They didn't want that. And so much the way we rallied around our ideal of a culture, so did they. And I think they bled both ways, right? They infused us and we infused them. And it made I do think it made a really special thing. And I just wanted to comment one thing. People ask me all the time, at this old age in my career, like, oh, Scott, what in your career you're most proud of? And I never hesitate it's not the financial success of Spiceworks or even how great the community is. That the thing I am so proud of is the culture we all created and how it has gone forth and kind of spread in the Austin community. Because I run into people, they don't even know what Spiceworks does. and well, what did you do, Mr. Abel? Oh, well, I started this little company called Spiceworks. Oh my God, that culture was amazing. I'm like, dude, come on, tone it down a little bit. You're embarrassing. So it is super cool. I'm incredibly proud.
Yeah, no, and even get people like Cabo Bob's, a local restaurant that they're very important of their culture too. But I was talking to their owner, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we used to love to go to the Spiceworks office and bring the food, and it's just like everything. It's just like the positive energy we felt there." And I was like, "That's what I feel when I come to your restaurant." So I was like, "I think it's permeating beyond
That's
even the tech
cool.
field."
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they used to love going there, and they're still like, they started in '08, and they started with one restaurant. Now they got 15 restaurants, but they're very important on their culture and their food ingredients. And I was like, wow, it's just like Spiceworks for food.
Yeah, yeah. And the
But it's
name
all,
almost fits too.
it
Yeah.
does, it really does have the vibe. But speaking along the restaurants, I did have a question in here I want to ask, because we know, like you just talked about with Motive and with all.com, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, to quote Rocky. So one of our community members asked, what was, looking back on those first early months when probably companies are the most fragile, do you remember a single make or break moment that you felt like if you would have went one way instead of the other way, we wouldn't be talking about Spiceworks here 20 years later?
Yeah, there were a couple. They might be a little bit inside baseball, but I think everybody will get them. So, when we start the company, the idea, a little bit of shaggy dog story, but we actually did this process called the percolator, where you kind of come up with these straw man business plans, and every week you get together and you beat the crap out of them. And the one that's left standing on a certain date, you pick and you say, we're going to do that. And it worked perfectly. And we came up with this super cool idea. By the way, nobody's done it yet. And and then Jay goes home. This was like on a Saturday night. We have a party at my house for just founders and the wives. They're like, hey, we came up with the idea. It's going to be super cool. Wasn't Spiceworks, by the way. And and then he comes in Monday morning. We're in this little loft above Hill Partners. They have an attic that we're hanging out in. And he's all like, his head's hanging down. He's kind of moping a little bit. And he's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, this thing is going to be too hard. If the go to market's going to be like a big enterprise software company. The space was kind of a tangent to business intelligence, kind of boring, frankly. And so, to their credit, what he was saying is, we have this list of things we said we didn't want to do, right? Because as every new founder came on board, I'm like, okay, what did you not like about Motive? What did you not like about, Jay was at 3M. Like, I didn't care what it is. What are those things we want to take off? And we all agreed we didn't want that big ticket enterprise software model. And so, like in a flash, in 30 minutes, they all bail on me and go, we're not doing that idea. So you need to go come up with that one. And I'm like, by now Francis is involved. And so I'm like, so you're going to ask the least intelligent person to save the ship. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And so I can't come up with anything. So like, I come back like 2 or 3 days later. I'm like, okay, what about open source desktop management for the small business market? And this was kind of the first of many things that caused us to be what we were. And everybody kind of looks at me like, oh, what the? And I'm like, well, WTF, like, you guys are the smart ones. And so, and then we kind of end up on this tangent talking about, lightweight desktop management, which rounds off to inventory. And, I'm like, well, what's wrong with inventory? Why is it so hard? And Greg and Francis start talking, and they're like, well, you got to put these agents everywhere. I'm like, okay, well, what if you didn't have agents? And Greg's like, well, you can't do it then. Like, that's the way it works. And the whole time Greg's talking, I'm watching Francis. Like, I don't really give a shit what Greg's saying, because he's not the smart one in the room, right? I mean, he's smart, but it's not that smart. And he would say that if you were sitting. And so Greg goes on for like an hour explaining, because he he's built it himself 3 or 4 times at Tivoli and even at Motive in excruciating detail why we cannot do it. This is super helpful when you start a company, by the way. But I noticed Francis, Mr. Calm is just sitting there. And so finally, and by the way, Jay, the whole time, it's like he's turning ashen. Like, my life is over. I got to go get a job. I can't believe I quit a good job to hang out with this moron. I really felt for him. And I'm not saying I felt significantly different at this point. And so then I turned to, in a moment of brilliance, I turned to Francis and I said, okay, Greg, shut up. All right, Francis, just humor me. Let's say the criteria was no agents. What could I do? Don't tell me what I can't do. Tell me what I could do. And it's hard to think of now, but this was 2006. This is kind of right at the beginning of January. And there were a bunch of Microsoft's protocols weren't quite open. They were just starting to open them up then. Anyway, he rattles off, here's what I think I can do. I can find the devices. I can tell you what kind they are. Maybe even I can tell you what software, blah, blah, blah. He rattles off stuff. And I'm like, that sounds like enough to start. Let's do that. So that was kind of number one. Number two was the business model, right? Like this whole idea of free, I was just like, I don't want to do the classic software. At first we were thinking, it would be like Salesforce. You pay, $10, $15 a month per seat, just what everybody was doing. But one of the things on our list, if you're an entrepreneur, the kiss of death is you build something and nobody uses it. And so one of the things we talked about was like, how do you guarantee people will use your software? And I'm like, well, if you only made money when they use it, then you're going to be really incented for them to use it. Like Salesforce, even, you can buy seats, doesn't mean you have to use them. And a lot of people don't, right? And that's now grown into this big contentious thing, renegotiating their contracts. Anyway, so I was like, well, I had this open source thing in our head, and then this, maybe if there was some way we could monetize usage, and I didn't know what this was. Well, Jay and I are going back and forth talking about this in Gmail. And it's just, we're cheap bastards. So it's just like consumer Gmail. And there's ads on the side. And I'm pretty sure this was Hallberg's idea. He goes, have you seen these ads? Like, you and I were talking about getting a logo done. And we found a place called Logo Loft because of an ad right there in Gmail, who did the original Spiceworks logo for like $100, probably a tenth of what we would have paid. Like, we paid Chris at Mag Design another $100 or $200 to clean it up a little bit, but the basic logo, the original one, Logo Loft did it. And he goes, "What if we did that?" I'm like, "What does that even mean? What if we did that?" He goes, like we ran ads inside the app. I'm like, inside an enterprise application. Nobody's ever done that before. He goes, "Yeah. Do you think that would work?" I'm like, "I have no idea. That sounds super cool. Let's do that." And then the kind of third, there were probably a million of them, but the third big one so those two were positives. There was a negative one, almost a negative one, that would have stopped the train. So our first, fast forward now, it's like June of 2006, and we have our first board meeting. And the only board member really is John Thornton from Austin Ventures, but he does have with him Tom Ball, who went on to start Next Ghost Ventures here in town. And Tom's kind of an observer. He's not the board member. And so we have a board member meeting. It's me and Tom and John, and that's it. And so, when I told John we were doing this, his exact words, he goes, this is either the stupidest idea I have ever heard, or it's brilliant, but I think you need to go faster to figure it out. And that would have been around March. So June is the first time they're going to see the product. And I don't even think they thought it was doable. I didn't think they thought you could make an agentless inventory tool that you could download, install, and be up and running in 10 minutes. So the first thing Greg does in the demo, in the board meeting, is he demos it. And they're like, holy shit, this thing works. Oh my God, this is amazing. You're going to sell, pay attention to the words here. You're going to sell a million of these things. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Remember, like free for everybody forever for any size. And we're going to try to make this medium model. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But like you could cap it at 100 or 1,000 or whatever, and then spend your time on that. And in one of the things you learn as a startup founder is like with boards, you have to learn the difference between input and a vote. And they have input, but they don't really have votes. Everybody thinks they do, but they don't. All they can do is fire me and hire my replacement, but they can't really tell you what to do. And so I come out of that board meeting, I sit down with founders. I'm like, well, I got good news and bad news. Good news is like, man, they were super excited. Francis, good job. Greg, good job. But I'm like, they want us to, charge for the software like at 100 seats or something like that. And Jay, Jay can be a tad emotional at times. Jay stands up, he goes, I'm out. NFW, I'm not doing that. I'm like, hold on, I didn't say we were doing that. I'm just communicating what they said. Just sit down. And then Greg's like, grumble, grumble, grumble. I'm like, guys, I didn't say we were doing that. This is what they said. Tell me what you think. And they were all so adamant. I was like, okay, guys, look, this is a burn the ships moment. Okay.
Yeah.
What we're saying is, because here's my anxiety. If we kind of sold software, we'd done that before. We knew how to do that. That was going to be like a great attractor. It was going to suck us in, right? Because it would be easier than learning something we'd never, ever done before. And so I'm just like, if we take one tiny step down that path, this other thing is over. And we didn't know the other thing would work. But what I knew is if we just inched down the software path, we would never figure it out. And so I was like, I think we've just got to torch the ships. And the only way forward is through. And everybody was like, okay, let's do it. And so then I call up Thornton, and I'm like, John, I'm super scared. I'm like, oh, he's going to scream at me. And dude was awesome. He was like, I explained it to him and he goes, I get it. Okay, well, we said it was a crazy idea. Let's see if it works. Tell me what you need. And like the first year we missed our revenue number, but then we started to figure it out. And, so that, there were two kind of positive ones. And then there was one that could have just slammed the door on the whole thing.
It's really amazing to hear that, right? Obviously moving there to that Indiana Jones, that leap, that step that like you have to take the step over this bottomless gulf and know that the step is going to be there. And which is a little scary to a lot of people, as much as you're like, well, I want to be able to see every step in front of us. And like, I don't think it sounds like in the startup world, you don't get that privilege.
No, it's funny. We met Austin Ventures every year used to do like this, little mixer or happy hour for all their portfolio companies. In the first 3 years, I didn't go because I got so sick and tired of people telling me my service wasn't going to work. That I was just like, screw it, I'm not going. I don't, need to hear yet another person explain to me how stupid this idea is. And then the fourth year, I think this was the year we did 5 million in revenue. I went and I met this guy from, I forget the name of the company. It was a chip startup here in town. They were designing a new class of digital and antenna chip for cell phones. It was called Black Fan or something like that. The entire staff is PhDs. Like they're all wicked smart. And I'm talking to the CEO and he's like, what do you do? And we tell him. And as Jay and I are standing there telling them like, okay, here's the software side of the business, blah, blah, blah. And then here's how we make money, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, the look on his face is kind of ashen. I'm like, what did I say wrong? He goes, what the F is wrong with you? Like he goes, what? Like starting one business wasn't hard enough. You had to start two. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, I mean, just that product you build for IT people, like, isn't that normally a whole company doing that? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, and then you started a media company also. I was like, well, when you say it like that, it's kind of scary.
Oh,
Uh, he goes, oh, I would have never. He goes, that's just like, he goes, at least for me, it's just, will the chip work or not? And if the chip works, I know exactly who's going to buy it and how big the market is. And whenever there's a better chip, everybody beats a path to your door. And he goes, maybe I'll never be able to get chip to work. But he goes, like, you literally invented two things and then stitched them together. And now you have this community thing too. He's like, what's wrong with you guys? And Jay and I were driving home and I was like, it's probably a good thing we didn't think about it that much.
right. Yeah, that is pretty terrifying to put it that way. Because yeah, Spiceworks has always really been that of just like we've always had our tools side, and we've always had that community side. And I did want to ask you about, well, one of the community members wanted to ask you just like, did you ever imagine the community would grow into this force of internet nature that it is? Where literally, I mean, we sent SpiceRex to space. We got somebody who got the logo tattooed on there. Like, did you ever imagine that it would turn into that?
No. As a matter of fact, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard this story within the community itself, but the community was never envisioned as an explicit process. So there were really three pillars to Spiceworks, right? The community, the product, and the business model. And two out of the three were complete accidents. Kevin Shell gets credit for the community because he came to me in July of 2006, maybe late June, about a month before we were going to launch. And he goes, oh, I have this really cool idea, because he hates product managers and he doesn't want to have to talk to them. Shell's a little bit of a little bit of a brilliant grumpy guy. And so he's like, so came with this idea, like, how about if we stick right in the product, a button you can push it, tell us what feature you want, and then vote it up or down, kind of like Reddit. And I was like, that's super cool. Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I'd need like 3 or 4 people and 4 or 5 months. I was like, we're not doing that. Like, hell no. Like, we are shipping the end of July, come hell or high water. I think that's super cool. We'll revisit that, after we go out. Well, apparently we did not need that many people and that much time, because in his spare time, he's working on all the servers for the, the product and everything. In his spare time, he builds the first version of that functionality, and that just eventually snowballed into the community, and
Right.
took off from there.
It's pretty awesome to hear. And like literally this week, we just launched, emotional spice ups, where back then it was just like, you literally just like spice up, spice down. But now we got party emojis, we got happy face emojis, we got some more emojis that we just literally just launched with that. So knowing that almost 20 years later, adding features like that, kind of going with the flow of what people are used to, in this new landscape. And if you may, like, we did have somebody that did want to ask you about similar experience with that. It's like, given your experience building Spiceworks and, your current take on community tech building right now, and especially in the age of AI and fragmented social media, like, what's your take on how community building is going to happen? A successful community building could happen today in the technology space.
Wow, that's a good one. That would suggest a level of depth in my IQ that probably I do not have. I haven't thought a ton about that, but look, I always look at the thing that I think is both positive and negative about this, generative AI trend is, on one hand, I don't think there's any substitute for connection, right? That at its core, forget the technology. The technology doesn't matter. It's enabling sometimes. It lets you, cross boundaries and oceans and things you couldn't have done before. But at the end of the day, and I think this is why the culture of the community was so important in the early days, it's that connection that really fosters its growth and its solidity, right? Keeping it the thing it was. And so I think there are things that technology enabled that would let you do parts of that faster or easier. The part that scares me is, you know, I can see somebody going, oh, well, I'm going to create a profile for this generative AI, member of the community and see how that goes.
Right.
And, it probably would fool us all for a little while until, those cultural attributes we talked about were not manifest in that. Now, maybe, as LLMs get smarter, it would get smarter and go, I need to behave this way. That's very possible. But, um, look, if I imagine how could it add value, if you look at the roles some of uh, the more experienced senior spice heads play in that community, you could see having, because there's so much depth behind an LLM, you could see having virtual versions of those that have unlimited capacity and can talk to as many people as need to. And is that better? I don't think so, but it's possible. I'm not suggesting it should go that way, but it's possible. And you're seeing those kinds of applications inside a lot of companies
Right.
for various kinds of support. So I don't know. Um, if Jen were on the call right now, she'd be cringing. She'd be like, that's the antithesis of everything she wants.
Exactly. And it's funny enough, we just finished our chat with her. And one of the biggest things that she's kind of echoing what you just said, it's just like this human being element is really what's keeping the community chugging along. Like there's a person behind there, personality behind there. You get to know them. That's really makes the community stand out, to the point where she told a story about how she basically had to go, to you guys kind of hat in hand and just like, hey, I think all of these introverts who are now inside Spiceworks and using it and loving it, they probably all want to meet in person and have a big event, and we'll call it SpiceWorld. And she really was like kind of saying that it really is going against the grain, right? It's just like, do you think these people are really going to want to get together and commune? And now this year, November 12th, is going to be the 19th SpiceWorld that we've ever had. So
Wow.
what's your memories on those early SpiceWorld days from your perspective? And then do you have a favorite memory from SpiceWorld?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. What I remember is I remember very clearly when she pitched it, and my context for this was at my first company, Motive, we had a users group meeting every year. We had done it for probably at this point the last 4 or 5 years prior to me starting Spiceworks. And it was super expensive. It cost the company like, 300 or 400 grand every year. We'd have maybe, I don't know, 100 people there. And um, it would, it was like some big software conference. You know what I mean? It was, I'd get up, I'd give a presentation on customer care, and I'd try to make it lively. It was a honor. There was nothing exciting about it. But mostly it took a ton of labor to pull off, and it was super expensive. So Jen shows up in our weekly ops meeting to pitch this idea for this Spice World. And she was like, oh, well, all these IT people will come together. I think we could get, 50 or 100. And I'm looking at Greg, and he's like, that's never going to happen. And, but she was just, classic Slasky. She was just so passionate about it. And I was like, okay, look, I'm not a believer. But also, like, what do I know? Like, SpiceWorks is here because shit happens, basically. So I said, I tell you what, if you can figure out how to pull it off and, not spend more than, I don't remember what number I gave. It was ridiculously small, like 15 or 20 grand. She goes, then we'll do it. And then I'm like, but like, don't be coming to me asking me for more money and extra, like, we're not playing that game. And she was just like, nope, I got it. If I need something, I'll come back, but assume it's not going to cost you anything. And I'm like, I don't know about that, but you're excited about it. So, okay. And I think what happened is she talked to McEwen and he was like, oh my God, I can get people to sponsor this. Like McEwen just saw dollars. And so, one thing led to another. And that first one, I think it was in the fall of that year, was at the Alamo. And there were like, I don't know, 98 people there. And it was phenomenal. And what I remember about my most vivid memory of SpiceWorld, even, some of them had 3,500 people. That wasn't the thing I remember. We did one of the ones, I think it was the first one we did at the AT&T Conference Center. So maybe they were like, by that time, there's 300 or 400 people there. And I'm standing there talking to Al Gashi, and somebody walks up next to me. And they're kind of in, somebody, you'll see them in your periphery, and I'm talking away to Gashi, and Gashi actually says, he interrupts me and says, Scott, I think they want to talk to you. And I hadn't even really registered. I turned around, and it's one of the IT pros, and they proceed to say, thank you. I just wanted to thank you for building SpiceWorks, for the community, and for SpiceWorld. And in passing, they just mentioned this, that they spent their own money and took their vacation to come to the event because that's how much it meant to them, because their boss would not let them get the time off to come. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like that is the pinnacle of success right there. And I was just stunned. And so I grabbed Slasky and I said, find this person. They're coming for free next year, and we're paying their way because their boss is a dick. and make sure their boss knows that. And I think next year they did not have to take vacation. They were probably at some, I don't remember, shame on me, I should remember, a school district or something that had no money. I get it.
Right.
And so I was just so touched by that, that if you want to talk about the personal effect of something you build, that was it. And then the second one was the tattoo. I was like, when I saw that picture came in of the woman who got SpiceRex, I was like, I made it. We scrambled and got those fake tattoos.
That's right.
And we wore them, for the event. And then later, that weekend, I was over at some friend's house, and then, it's always warm in Austin, so I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, and they're like, "Oh, what is that?" I'm like, no, it's not real. Don't freak out. And then I tell them the story, and Tony, this friend of mine, he says, "You don't run a company, you run a cult." And I'm like, I don't know about that, but it is pretty cool. I doubt this will ever happen to me again. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And to this day, it still feels that family reunion, that annual family reunion. It still happens where you have, our tech vendor friends and the spice heads and the spice workers all kind of coming together, where you can't really tell, like another conference, it's clear, like, here's their booth, here's the pitches, this is where you go. Where here, it's still all kind of like melds together, especially at like the party, and just like, how are you part of this party?
Yeah, I think that's, again, I credit kind of all the employees for that. They're just, you can't legislate that. I mean, there are things we did, like having all the employees go to the party. And I don't remember, you would know probably better than me, I don't remember getting up and saying, don't misbehave, don't. It was just so infused into our culture of those IT pros are like part of us. They're an extended part of the company that it wouldn't have occurred to anybody to behave that way. You didn't have to.
Right.
If anything, it went the other way. I remember a couple times, maybe a IT pro imbibing a little bit too heavily and, maybe getting a little too rowdy and the other IT pros would just like sit them down and go, dude, knock it off. Like, not here.
Yeah.
You can do that at the Salesforce conference. Don't do that here.
It's great.
Cool.
It's great that you say that because we have, it's kind of official now. They're called the Spice Buddies, right? So what the Spice Buddies do is you're kind of like your fixer to come to the event of like, this is what you should do. This is what you can do. Here's the official events. Here's the unofficial events. Make sure you have 2 pairs of shoes. Make sure you get hydrated. If you come here, here's some aspirin. And they have their own thing where they've always had a seat at the table. Like you said, we've always take the IT pro into account, but now they officially have their own booth to just like, hey, are you new to SpiceWorld? Look for this person and they will basically be your event mentor. So it's really, cool. It's really grown into that. But like personally though, like how does it make like you feel like, we talked about like the origin and how we got there to see that culture kind of still after 20 years, still going very strong. If somebody was to come.
No, go ahead.
I was like, if somebody was to come to you today, it's just like, hey, this Spiceworks thing is pretty cool. How would I start that company? What would you even tell? Like, what would you tell them?
It's funny. You frame it that way because that question I get asked a lot. A lot of people will come to me and say, hey, we're doing XYZ, some product or something. We think it has a really cool like community angle to it that's possible. What should we do? And I'm always like, I always tell them, look, I can tell you how we nudged things in the direction we did. What I can't do is I can't create, and you can't create the 20 or 30 or 50 somewhat random moments that came together to produce the outcome that we're talking about, right? Like, in the beginning, it was just about product features. And then Tabby, it wasn't what he did in trying to nudge it to general Q&A. It was how he did it,
right.
He could have done it in the wrong way and we would have gotten Q&A and it would have ended up badly. And so there were all of these things that, a lot of them probably stemmed from our company culture. And so a lot of times I'll tell people, look, the Spiceworks community is a almost literal reflection of our company culture. It extended out to and through them and vice versa. And so if you want to go build that kind of community, you have to build that kind of company. And then I start talking about what we did and everybody backs off. They're like, whoa. I'm not having breakfast and lunch with every employee every year. Like I'll be as big as the house. And I'm like, well, that was the how, but somehow you need to get to know them. Somehow you need to find out what do they care about. Somehow you need to understand what is it that Jeff Gretler wants to get out of this company he's working for, right? And if you don't do that, then I'm not saying you won't have a good culture, but you're not going to have our culture. Right. And very few people, I've only met one company that was kind of willing to make that investment. It was a company I was on the board of called Level Set. And I don't think it was the same as ours, but they were Venn diagrams. There was a lot of overlap. And if you look at how he spent his time, the founding CEO, very similar. Like he spent a wildly disproportionate amount of his time on company culture, just like I did.
And I can account for that with you. I mean, I remember first starting there, and when we still didn't have a digital board and we just had the pictures of all the employees on there. And I remember seeing you more than one time going through and then looking at each picture, taking the time to just like get to probably know names or know faces. And then I can also account to the famous Slices with Scott, right? Which was like an AMA real life, just like we're all going to sit together. We're going to have pizza and you're going to ask Scott questions. And then I also remember going, I cannot look at a Fireball Cafe and not think of Scott Abel, because it's just like, that's the lunch that you're going to go to with the CEO. Like, I remember all these things as they're happening. It's just like, oh, you're going to go do this. You're going to go have slices. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, it was like, I've never experienced anything like that before.
And I loved those. I just loved all of those, slices with Slasky's idea. Because originally it was, I'd go to lunch with every employee every year, at least once a year. And then like you can't do that. But I didn't want to give it up. And so she's like, let's batch them up, but we'll keep it small enough, so that it's intimate and people can ask you anything they want. And I was always, blown away by the stuff people would ask. Sometimes it was personal. Sometimes it was, why did we make this business decision? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I just loved that people would ask. It was great.
I mean, you have a very unique ability to, obviously you're an inspiration, but you at the same time make people feel very comfortable to ask maybe hard questions, or like to the point where it probably make you feel like, whoa, why are you asking me? But you just have that personality like on stage. Was that something you feel like you were born with, or did you just learning under like greats like Steve Jobs and stuff? Like, how did you figure out that?
I'm laughing because definitely it wasn't born. What I was born with is being an asshole. I by nature am, I'm highly introverted, probably very unwarranted. I was very arrogant. I thought I was much smarter than I actually was. Like, this was all me kind of pre-leukemia. And, I credit leukemia with a lot of it. It was a very leveling, humbling, grounding experience that I think, unless you're really twisted, it's almost impossible for you to go through something like that. It could be anything, doesn't have to be that. I think any life-threatening, whether it's a car accident or some other kind of health event, will do that to you if you're paying attention. And I came out of that thinking, okay, I consciously want to be a different type of person. And it used to really, there were some things about startups that bugged me. And one of them was this idea that, the people in your company, they can't comprehend certain things. Like, one thing I did learn from Steve Jobs, we had an all company retreat in January of 1990. And he got up, and this had absolutely no functional value for the company. He goes, at the time we had about 400 employees. He goes, I'm going to walk through the negotiation with IBM and how we got them to license Next Step for their R6000 and put $60 million in the company. And he even explained why. He goes, you're probably sitting there going, why do I have to listen to Steve brag about some deal he got with IBM? He goes, because someday, this was very prophetic. He goes, someday it's going to be you at your company. And I want you to understand it doesn't matter how small you are. If you're kind of in the right, you can win and succeed against a much, much, much bigger company. And so he walked through everything. And I'm like, all I could hear was like, damn, how do you have the balls to ask for that? But he's kind of, it didn't hurt that he was Steve Jobs and he started Apple, but that subconsciously stuck with me, right? And what I remembered was how it made me feel. Like, it made me feel like, wow, I could just go out, and there wasn't a lot of email at the time in 1990, but like, I could go grab a reporter and tell them all this, and that would be bad. And so the trust factor was off the charts. And so, when I looked at that, some of our cultural values around transparency and, just trusting everybody and treating them, I don't want to treat people like kids. If you come to work at SpiceWorks, I'm going to treat you like an intelligent employee. And there's nothing I know that you shouldn't be able to know. And if you don't understand it, just ask me. Like, I didn't understand it before I learned it. I wasn't born with all of this knowledge. And I think there is a little bit of a teacher in me, and so I do enjoy, helping people learn that stuff. And so it was never, it wasn't burdensome. I think some people will go, well, that's a total waste of my time. I could be spending the time on product, and I never thought that. I always enjoyed helping people learn more about the company.
And that was awesome. And that was another whoa, what's happening moment is those Friday meetings where we would spill it all out on the table. Just like, let's have a drink, here's some snacks, and let's talk about everything that we're doing, like whether it's numbers or stuff we're planning. And it was just like, I've never seen anything like this before.
I'll tell you, it's funny you bring that up because, since I retired in 2018, and I've advised probably a dozen companies since then. And I still do, probably I'm doing 3 or 4 right now to various degrees. I am stunned the number of people who do not understand, just tell people the truth. Like, it's not going to cause them to quit. They're not going to run screaming.
Right.
Like, I don't know if it's a fear of conflict or what it is, but outside of this one guy, his name is Scott Wolf. He ran Level Set and they sold it to Procore. All the rest, they're like, well, I don't think I can give them this bad news. I'm like, because you think they don't already know? You're a moron. The first rule of a company is all bad news travels the speed of light to everywhere. The only question is, are you going to get to frame it for people? Not are they going to hear it, but can you help them understand it? Because they're going to hear it. And I cannot get people to do it unless they kind of grew up at Spiceworks, right? Like, Brian's off doing his thing. And he's like, I saw an email the other day, some challenges. Okay, here's what's going on. Here's what's good. Here's what's bad. Here's what we're going to do about it. I was like, yes, well done. But like, if you didn't grow up there, God, it's so frustrating. I'm just like, what are you people afraid of? But I think there's this, if you're a CEO and a founder, you're supposed to have all the answers. Newsflash, I didn't have them. Yeah, like you guys all had them. So the more people that would hear it, the more better the chance was we'd solve the problem.
That's a good way to put it. And I still used one of your lines on my son just last week when I said, it's just news. There's no such thing as good news or bad news. It's just news. You decide what it's going to be. And I was like, oh yeah, that was a Scott. Yeah. So it drilled into my head. I know we're getting close on time, and I appreciate you taking this time. Just a couple more questions. Like you said, you retired in 2018. What's the one thing you miss the most about the spicy years? I'll put it as because that was, like you said, over a decade of your life, and you're still somewhat. People think Spiceworks. They think you, Greg, Francis. Like, what do you miss? What's the one thing that you really miss about those days?
Yeah, this is so weird for me to say because, physicist, introvert, off the charts introvert. I miss the people. I miss the act of running a company, meaning all the mechanics of it. I loved those Friday meetings, whether they were good news or bad news, like our quarterly meetings. Like those opportunities to openly talk about, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we did, here's working, here's what's not, and the interaction, like just getting up to talk about it, that wasn't that great. But the interaction that came from it, the Q&A and everything, I loved doing that. This was about a year and a half ago, I got invited at one of the companies I was advising. He's like, hey, could you come to a few of my offsites? It was just him and his executive team. But, I had to almost pull back because I found myself like slipping into that same thing. And the CEO, who's not like 20, he was like 41 or 42. He just doesn't have as much experience doing it. And you could almost see the head shifting, like, and the allegiance shifting. And I was like, whoa, I got to pull back on this throttle a little bit because by now it's very natural and I like doing it. So I think that's what I miss the most. We just had it was so much fun to watch people grow,
Yeah.
and they come in and just kick ass at their job, and stumble and learn, but in the end, I see all these people off in these senior director or VP roles everywhere, and I'm like, yes, I did my job well. That's what I was
Yeah.
supposed to do.
I was just going to say, and I love to see it. We said the clusters of spice workers, you can follow along in LinkedIn and see the journey of the careers. And like, oh yeah, they ended up here. It's awesome to see. One more question for the community. So what advice would you give to a community member to help keep the spice alive? Like you said, you've seen it all. You've seen the highs and the lows and the fast growth and the pivots and stuff. What would you say, just an IT pro, well, this is where it started with them for you. Let's make their life easier and spicier. What advice would you give them to kind of help keep that magic alive?
The magic in the Spiceworks community?
Yeah. Yep, yeah. The magic of the community.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it already. Take the cultural values that we had. We held everybody to a high standard, but we did it respectfully. So first, no assholes. Don't tolerate assholes in the community, and they're great at that, right? They don't. They take them aside, they give them a talk, and if that isn't it, they're out. I think that's huge. But it's easy when. I think this is how a lot of technical forums slide down the slippery slope. It's easy when you're not right for somebody to take something and in correcting it get personal, right? And we struggled with this. Everybody does. It's human nature. But we tried very hard to make it such that you making a mistake or failing at a part of your job wasn't a reason to disrespect you or demean you. And the way I always did this, and I think this would work for the community too, is every person I hired, I went, okay, their success, I'm not going to let them off the hook, but I have a responsibility in that success to help them. And so if you fail, I failed. It's not just you. And I think a lot of times people don't think that way. And so if you have a community member that, has to be jettisoned, what did we not do for them to get it? Right? Because everybody else got it. And literally millions of them. And so if one fails, that means somewhere we didn't listen enough, we weren't respectful enough, we didn't educate enough. All those things, those pillars they stand on. You do have to turn it back on yourself and go, could I have done more? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the light bulb just doesn't want to change. But but a lot of times it will tell you, no, next time there's one or two things I can do that I didn't do. And so they've got those strong cultural pillars. They have to just keep using them.
Make it a very safe place to be wrong. I've felt that at Spiceworks, and I've also felt that in the community, because then honesty.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. You got to make it okay for people to fail.
Yeah. And so I project. Well, it wouldn't be the community without these quick lightning round questions that I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to let you go. I promise, because it's the community, so you're going to recognize some of these questions. First one: is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Is a taco a sandwich?
No.
No. Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
Sure. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. How would you like your bacon cooked?
I'm kind of in the middle. Not too crispy, not too soft.
Okay. Two more. Peanut butter, crunchy or smooth?
Smooth.
Yes. And this last one for our very dear friend, Sean Dahlberg. How do you pronounce GIF?
Yeah.
GIF. We say GIF. Some people say GIF. Speaking of peanut butter.
Yeah.
So you're a GIF guy.
I'm a GIF guy. Yeah.
You're a GIF guy. Well, I appreciate it. Scott, we've had some great memories together. I mean, how many people can work for somebody to say, yeah, I rode around in a helicopter with him fighting fake aliens. So thank you for
Oh my God, that's right.
putting my career in a trajectory that I never would have thought that 15 years later, I'm still here, because I feel like, where else can I go to feel that spicy as an IT professional? And now, even not doing the IT, but just doing the brand part of it, I've taken a lot of stuff that Jen has taught me, and that you have taught me, and all our founders have taught me. And I feel like, even though you guys have retired, I'm still moving forward all those values that you taught me. So I want to personally say thank you for taking that time with me and us and our community. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And it was a blast to catch up. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I did. So I did as well. So we are coming up to the 19th SpiceWorld. So maybe the 20th SpiceWorld, we could get a Scott Abel appearance. I'm just saying, we're super close.
maybe. I'm always open to it.
We're super close. All right, Scott, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
You bet. Take care, Jeff.
Take care. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Thank you so much to Scott Abel. Still inspiring after all this time. Thank you so much for joining us. We have more surprises coming, interviews with more founders, more original employees, because this is the 20th anniversary of you, Spiceworks. Thanks again for joining us today. Don't forget to tech yourself before you wreck yourself, and we'll see you next time.